Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of My First Season. And oh boy, do we have a doozy for you today. I never had the pleasure of working with my next guest, but we did meet for the first time in 2003 in Sandpiper, where he was the chief of village. He did a whopping 39 seasons in Club Med and 14 years in the Miami Club Med office. And in a My First Season first, he is the first guest on the show who is still currently employed by Club Med. He is the Senior Director, UDT, which stands for Université des Talents, in the Club Med office in Miami. Still don't know who I'm talking about? Well, he is originally from Vancouver, now lives in Miami, and in 2 years of this podcast, his name has come up so often that when I ran into him at Red's birthday party in Montreal during the summer of 2022, I had to stop myself from practically begging him to come on the podcast. Luckily for me, he graciously agreed. In Club Med, he is known by one name and one name only. And in fact, he is the only Club Med employee around the world that has a nickname in their Outlook address. Of course, I am talking about the one and only, the incredible, the Iron Man, the always positive, the man, the myth, the legend. He's probably going to kill me for saying this. It's Hammer time. Please welcome Chris Keeley, a.k.a. Hammer. Hammer, how are you this morning, sir?
Well, I think we might have to wrap up this session after that. I'm good to go.
Yeah, I see we're out of time. Okay.
I was already a legend in my own mind, and now you really got me in trouble.
Okay. Well, welcome. Welcome to My First Season.
Thank you, Greg. And listen, I got to do something and get right back at you. And
sure.
I said I do that in Montreal is a massive appreciation of what you're doing. A big thank you to you. I've been listening to you for a long time, and it's impressive the way you've kept people, kept all the GOs, the ex-GOs, and the whole spirit of Club Med in such a positive light. So, I mean, you've set a great tone on this podcast. So big thank you to you. And of course, a shout out. As you say, I've listened to so many, and it's almost embarrassing when you hear your name come up so many times. So
yeah, do you get disappointed? You get disappointed when your name doesn't come up now because it happens so often? You're like, hey, I work with that guy. Why didn't he mention me?
No, but I'm sure proud to hear so many of them doing great in life now. That's for sure. So many people I worked with over the decades, you know?
Well, yeah. And like I said, I never got the chance to work with you, unfortunately, but, always heard of you and finally got to meet you in Sandpiper in 2003. So, well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks again for coming on and sharing part of your story with us here today.
No, pleasure. And I know we talked about it in Montreal and you just announced it and proud of it. I think both you and I that we'll call this a groundbreaker and hopefully I can help you as well to do podcasts with existing GOs. Because the key to everything you're doing and the key to the club is that DNA that still exists since 1950, the spirit, the emotional attachment that every GO has had over the years. Same today as it was 72 years ago.
I know, you're right. You're right. And where I work currently at Concordia University, people are always asking me, Greg, why did you leave? And I'm like, have you met me? Because I'm an idiot, So, we all wish we were back and, we miss it more than ever. And it's good to talk to people like you and ex-GOs to keep it alive, like you said.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, you know how we do here. If you could take me back in time, sir, to what you were doing, where were you living, were you working and going to school? And how did you first hear about Club Med?
Well, I'll tell you what it is. I'll give you the story. And the beginning of the Club Med story with myself was never alone. It was always the big three: myself, Jenner, and Cheese, who you've talked to extensively. We kind of have two first seasons, which again, I know I'm cheating on the podcast again. We were traveling the South Pacific, and the reason we were traveling the South Pacific was a buddy back home, Sparrow. He said, you guys got to go to Club Med. I've been there with my parents when I was 18. It's awesome. Sports, party, girls, you got to go. So we thought about it. And when we were going on this South Pacific trip, we had got talked into the package by our high school football coach's wife, travel agent. And in the end, when she knew we were going to Tahiti, she said, oh, if you're going to Tahiti, you've got to stay at a Club Med. And we were like, no way. And she pushed and pushed. And I finally said, you know what? Jenner, Cheese, you stay in this Club Med place. I'll stay outside the compound. That was my image, And finally, she said, look, guys, in Club Med, the beer's included and you can water ski all day. And we said, okay, we'll go. So that became a trip as a GM to Tahiti. And a short story, or make it short, we were in there and, looking for girls, myself and Jenner and Cheese, who had also a kind of ex-GO. Michelle was still his girlfriend. So Cheese was the good boy on the trip. And Jenner and I were on the prowl. And then we watched this huge, big Bahamian guy in this wild outfit walk past us. And we said, oh, man, there's our competition. Later to find out that he was Hansel, the chief of sports, who you've also done a podcast with. And later that evening, he called us on stage. And 5 days later, he met with us and said, "Can I talk to you guys? I hear you're Canadian. You're a little obnoxious. You're a little crazy, but you're nice and everybody likes you. Why don't you stick around and work with me?" And we were like, "What?" Yeah, just do a little short-term stint with us here in Moorea, Tahiti. So we actually stayed working in Tahiti. So that became our first experience, if you will. It wasn't an official first season because we weren't sent there by Club Med, but we were recruited on site for a quick stay. So that was kind of my first season right there.
And you still remember to this day meeting Hansel?
Oh man, walked by him, and as I said, he was this, Hansel. He was a big bodybuilder at the time, and had such a presence. He filled up a room, and as well, we were thinking, "Oh man, girls are going to like him better than us. That's no good." So, but of course, he became not only a responsive sport, but our mentor, and really the one who taught us the true DNA of Club Med, of making people happy.
True enough. I spent 2.5 years with him. I was lucky, and yeah, I would agree with that for sure. All right. You finish your South Pacific trip, I assume. So what happens when you get home?
Well, then we start to morph into the first season. We could not get back to work. We were just not obsessed, but just caught so emotionally, like so many of us have been in the past, in only 3 weeks. We just couldn't get it out of our mind. I was selling real estate. Jenner was an assistant research scientist at Simon Fraser University. Cheese was in charge of the produce department at Safeway. I mean, we had careers, and we just couldn't do it. So we kept calling New York office, and they were like, "We've never heard of you. Who are you people?" Meanwhile, Hansel, he was trying to get us on in Turquoise. Finally, we get this call, and New York says, "Well, look, one of you can go." So they, of course, Jenner and Cheese nominate me. So I'm getting ready to go to Turquoise, which I'd never heard about before. And of course, fly in, as all of you and we were, this uneducated kind of on Club Med first season experience. What we found out 10 years later at my wedding is we asked everybody to tell a story at our wedding. So Hansel told the story of when he was in Turquoise that time in 89, 90. And he had gone to the chef de village, José Aliel, and said, "Look, by the way, I got to bring these 3 guys, maybe short term if I can, to Turquoise." And he's like, "What are you talking about, 3 guys? I've never heard about these people. You can't just bring 3 guys." So that didn't work. So he went back 2 weeks later, went to José Aliel. This is back in the day. And he says to José Aliel, "José, I can't do my season with you unless I bring these 3 guys in." And José looks him in the eye and goes, "You can bring 1." And that's how I got to go. So a week later, Hansel tells the story. José came to see him after a week in the village, and he goes, "Okay, I've seen this guy. Bring the other 2." And that became, the next 2 seasons of Jenner Cheese Hammer kind of rallying the troops in every village and going nuts. So that was how we got into a village.
Okay, let's mention. Normally, I ask this question later on, but your nickname Hammer. So I'm assuming you got it back in BC, but then how did you get the nickname Hammer, and then how did it follow you to Club Med?
Well, remember, we only got an hour on the podcast. So again, I'll try the quick. But back in baseball back in Richmond, Vancouver, BC, and in a big ball tournament, and an NFL player named Jim Mills, he comes and bumps the announcer, who happened to be my dad. My dad ran the announcing booth. So he kicks my dad out, and he starts announcing the game half cut. And he's a famous NFL player, so nobody's going to say anything to him. So he starts announcing, and we go way back, and his dad went way back with my dad. So we're in the middle of this tournament, a big game, and I'm coming up to the plate, and he just slurs, "Next up to bat, number 9, Chris the Hammer Keeley," because it was the era of the hammer in the wrestling. So I single, which is no big deal, but I'm sitting on first base, and my dugout, who just loves this, they start chanting "Hammer, Hammer." And of course, the fans in the beer garden starts going Hammer. So that was back home, because everybody who plays hockey in Canada, as you know, has got a nickname. So I get to Club Med, and it's Chris Waterski. That's me. There was Chris Tennis, and there was Chris Beach. So at one point, the secretary of the chief of village got so sick of having Chris 1, Chris 2, Chris 3 on the Geo program. She heard Jenner and Cheese always call me Hammer, so she just started writing down Hammer on the program. And nicknames were so thick in the club. 2 or 3 seasons later, I'd get mail to a village for Chris Keeley, and the secretaries would just throw it away because they only knew me as Hammer. So it caught on, let's say.
Okay. Wow. At Turquoise, they put you in water ski?
That was the day almost you'd arrive in a village, and a chief of sports and chief of village would sometimes, "You know what? I'm short of a guy here. You're going to water ski." And I did have a bit of a background, but I mean, nowhere near what the Club Med water ski geos were like. I mean, they were pros at the time. And I was just thrown into this team of barefooters and competitive ski course runners. And here's Mr. First Season Hammer water ski.
Did Jojo come out to see you like while you're piloting a boat or anything?
Well, I'll tell you what, we probably won't get into the differences of the years, but that
Okay.
was the day when we water skied. There was 7-foot wingspan rays floating by all the time, 4-foot barracudas, and Jojo was at that water ski dock 2 hours a day. He would knock over the skiers' ski just when they were about to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a great part of the village, though.
He's doing his little animation passage, Jojo.
Oh, yeah.
Well, while you're at water ski, like, I'm wondering, like, how long did it take you to, start noticing what everyone else was doing? Did you want to go to land sports at all, or were you happy staying where you were in water ski?
Well, again, here's that legend in my own mind. I mean, we were out of control, Cheese, Jenner, and I. We walked into this thing. We knew it was this unorganized company because we came out of business. We knew it was just unique. But for us, it was utopia because we said, okay, these guys are getting paid to make people happy. The more happier we make people, the more these people like us. This is not possible. And so we didn't just embrace that. We just took it on as if it was, our kingdom. And so I was in water ski, Cheese on the beach, and Jenner in land sports, and it just suited us all. So none of us wanted to change. And Jenner was inventing land sport things, and he took over the weekly fitness programs, and I was going in the water ski shows in heaven. And Cheese, First Season Joe, he'd walk up to Jose Aleo backstage and say, "Hey, Jose, I saw the beach party last week. I don't know if it was that good. I'd like to organize the beach party." And, you don't get that much even today. A Chef Village listening to a First Season like that, they kind of have to earn their way. But he saw it in his eye and he said, "Okay, you run the next beach party." And, we were begging for the microphone. And every time I look at an old picture, I see me on the microphone. I say, how the heck did I figure that out First Season? But we just loved it. We just ran with it. So it was a pleasure.
Now, do any of your funny stories come from this season at all in Turks and Caicos?
Now you might get me in trouble.
Okay.
No. There was some beauties. And you know how that First Season doesn't just resonate when we talk about it with each other, but it's all of us. Everybody was a Geo has that emotional attachment and I think you brought it up when we were going back and forth a bit, that magic, I think was the word. I can't remember.
Yes.
Of that First Season. It's enchantment, So yeah, we were in Turquoise that First Season, 89, when Hurricane Hugo came by. So here's this entire team, and we were on a roll then. I mean, we had a party team, and it was a successful, village because it was all about the energy and hanging with the GMs and doing great shows, it was all about the ambience. And so Hurricane Hugo hits, and so they decide to evacuate us and put us in Sandpiper. So these 89 or 109 Geos from Turquoise, we come in, already, again, half cut coming off the travel from the plane, and we pull into Sandpiper. Just 3 days of debauchery, party, no sleep. I mean, we put Sandpiper at another level. And when we left, people used to tell me after, they were like, "What happened? Who were those people? What the heck?" So a taste of Turquoise and Sandpiper back then was pretty funny. So that was awesome. I think it actually made us prouder as a team. We beat the Hurricane. You get out, you have fun, you come back, and we were even more fired up for the rest of the season.
This story has me jealous on so many levels because when you got to leave before I got there, and then you got to go to Sandpiper, and you didn't have to work in Sandpiper, right?
Getting a taste of another village was always cool.
Yeah.
The other one well, there's so many, as you can imagine, as you know, but in Turquoise, we also just started to embrace that European culture. I mean, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. The only thing that ever threw me back in the day was, Speedos. Darn, why are these Europeans wearing Speedos? Yes, they almost forced you into
the culture. Yes, the culture shock. That's quite a common thing on this podcast, was the culture shock of the so many Speedos.
But on the European language, on the food and beverage, on the, I don't know, that French flavor of Club Med, we loved it right away. And so one of the things that always caught us was all these French 7 o'clock, because, that was aperitif time. So we're all at the bar. And, if you go back that far, you also have if you're not at the bar at 7, you're on the next flight home. So we liked it, but 7 o'clock was a massive pressure. So all the French were always having that Ricard, or the pastis. And, we were on our cold beer, Canadian. So we started to get on that Ricard a little bit, and just to be part of the gang. So I was an Olympic captain one time, and I said, you know what? Popcorn was my water ski responsable or chief of activity. And he was a French dude, Alain Barret, popcorn. And no matter what story you ever get, Greg, from whatever XGO, from whatever XRDS, I can promise you that in 72 years, nobody could drink like this guy. Nobody. He would put 10 Brooklyn New Yorkers under the table every night down at the disco in Turquoise. So, he taught us the ropes there and how to really hook up with the GMs in terms of supporting them on a GM show and being in the front row, in terms of making great friends with all the guys and not falling into that old trap of chasing GM girls, which, okay, it's human nature, but it doesn't create a great vacation. The key was always to make friends with everybody and to animate a table, a dinner table. I mean, the guy was the master, and he knew that the more fun you had, the better job you were doing. So you're making GMs have the best vacation of their life. You're not getting too drunk. You're not stealing girls. You're just making sure everybody had a great time. And so you end up having a great time, and so did they. So I said, Popcorn, I'm Olympic captain. I'm going against you, and I'm going to drink Ricard all night long instead of beer. And he's like, don't do it. I'm telling you, you guys think you're French. You're not. So I had Ricard in my beer drinking contest. I had Ricard for dinner. I had Ricard after, and I had Ricard in the nightclub. So the next day, of course, I'm late for water ski. I get berated by the team, and GMs are all staring at me. I walk down to the dock, and I grab the ski hook. In those days, we had to bring in the ski rope because we couldn't get too close to the dock. It was a unique dock. 9:30, 10 o'clock, about 10:15, I put the hook down. I put my pen to the board, take about 50 GMs on the dock. They look at me. I say, I got to go. So I start walking down that long dock in Turquoise back to the village. And then I start jogging. And then I start running. And I make it about 3/4 of the way down. I turn to the right and I just vomit like a movie, like a Will Ferrell movie. And I turn around after, bent over and finishing the upchucking. And I see 50 GMs on the dock giving me a standing ovation. And so, it was a horrible night that maybe in 2022, you get, if not fired, sanctioned for that, rightly so. But I get a standing ovation because that was the period. And when you had great relationships with everybody, they loved to see the GO humorously fall on their face, So I was more famous from that than if I had not done it.
Okay. Two questions. Are you saying that you replace in the standard beer drinking contest, you replace beer with Ricard? Is that what you're telling me?
Can you imagine? I mean, it wasn't a full, that 8 ounce, it was about a 4 ounces of Ricard.
Okay. So they had to chug this against
someone
else,
just
right?
for me, just for me. Greg.
Oh, just for you. Okay.
Everybody else did there.
Now, did you develop a taste for this? Like, can you drink Ricard now? Do you like it now?
Not after that night.
Okay, got it. Okay, okay. I never had that experience, but no, I never developed the taste. I tried, but okay, fair enough. Okay. Now, when you're speaking about popcorn and all that, was it around this time? Like, because I've heard you said that you could tell if a GM wasn't happy from 20 feet away. Now, what were some of your cues, and then I know you gravitated towards those GMs and tried to win them over, correct?
It's a great point. And I know when we chatted a bit and you talk about which when I was in charge of recruitment, I would use this phrase. I still use it today. I talk to the existing GOs. If somebody's, not sure if they should stay or not. And I tell them one thing, I said, guys, you got to internalize this. This is the best school you'll ever be paid to attend, bar none. Just doesn't exist in the world. And that's the same today. Language, sports skills, people skills. So the things we all learned that first season, I mean, Cheese was doing tricks on the windsurf board, people skills, Jenner on stage. And I'm sure he's going to listen to this, but Jenner, the worst dancer of all of us, almost learned to dance, So we're getting all these skills, but the one that still resonates today, and I guess language is probably one, being able to communicate in more than your maternal language, was EQ. That emotional intelligence that became so attuned because you're trying to make sure the gyms have a good time. Well, the first way to make sure to have a good time is to identify if they're not having a good time. And people like Hansel and the old school, the family of real GOs, they taught us that. We were immersed in it. And so when I say from 20 feet, I could see somebody who was slightly confused, had a question, something was wrong. And it was just drilled into us till it was such a reflex, a positive reflex, that I would never let anybody go by like that. If I saw that, my need to identify and find a solution for them was so strong. People like us, like our gang there, we'd go up to them. So that bodes well in any business, of course. And today, and I'm in the HR field, it's all about that. It's identifying people's positive, medium, or negative issues they have at the time and trying to help them along or develop or get to the next step. So yeah, I tell you, the emotional intelligence developed in those first few seasons was incredible.
Okay. And I see that from Turquoise, you go to Playa, St. Lucia, and Cancun. But at one point in Cancun, you switch to an animator. So you leave the sports team and go on to be the animator. Can I ask why?
Well, you know what? This time I gotta give you the long answer.
Okay, go ahead.
The mobility in Club Med, which still exists today, and it's still an attraction for candidates who want to be a GEO, and all our ex-GEO field recruiters that help us with recruitment are so good at this because you can explain the positive side of mobility. Because there's a negative, not knowing where you're going next, and last minute changes, and 1 week at home before you go somewhere. I mean, that's tough, but the upside is so huge. So again, in the day, I arrived just after the period when GEOs used to get sent home, mostly in Europe because of the seasonal villages, and wait to get a phone call wherever they were going. I mean, it was that last minute. So, of course, Jenna, myself, and she, want to stay together. And we're like, man, 3 guys at the same place. I mean, we were still intimidated. We were still close with Jose, but he was still a chief of village. So we're like, oh, man. So the 3 of us asked for a meeting with him, which, again, is funny. It's kind of unheard of. We walk into his office. We say, look, we really want to work with you. Want to work together. And so, he's doing the chief of village thing, gives us a stern look. I'll see what I can do. Again, little do we know, he calls up his old chief of sports, who's now become chief of village, Pierre Letier-Gagnon, the first Canadian chief of village ever. And so we find out later, he calls up Pierre and he goes, Pierre, listen to me. I have 3 guys here. You're going to take them. They're all 3 Canadian. They're coming to play a blanket with you. I don't care what position you have for them. They're going to be on your team. Because, it was that hierarchical thing in Club Med. If a chief of village had helped pass you, you were always not in debt, but beholding in a friendly way to them, So Pierre has to take us, and he didn't know us from Adam. And then he sets up for Hansel to go there. So, of course, Hansel's bringing in his crew. And back then, you could have a chief of village or a chief of sports bringing in 10, 15, 25 of their team. So now we go into Playa, and it's the Turquoise gang in Playa. Then Playa to St. Lucia, it's the gang in there. So then we're in St. Lucia, and now we say, well, we've done a year with Pierre. We know you got to change chief of villages to learn things or get a different experience. And man, we want to do something else, but you can't tell a chief of village that. So again, as fate would have it, as it seemed to always with us, Jose Ariel goes back to the villages from the office. So he contacts Pierre in St. Lucia by fax, of course. And the traffic geo, Lynn, she comes to us one day and she goes, look at this fax. And you see 7 names on the fax. And Jose says, Pierre, these 7 geos are coming to Cancun with me. So we already knew where we were going before anybody else. And yeah, we arrive in Cancun, and that's where another direction change happened in my career. As you mentioned and asked there, I was back in water ski, and there was an animator named Bam Bam there, legendary animator named Bam Bam.
Yes.
So that was the first year. We went from 6 months to a year because of the Gulf War. And financially, logistically, we just couldn't move thousands of people every 6 months. So all of a sudden, Club Med's going to go to a 1-year assignment. Well, I mean, people were devastated. And Bam Bam was so principled, he went to Jose Leon and said, I quit. There's no way I'm working a year. So off Bam Bam goes. And he goes, but you better put Hammer as animator. And Jose says, no, he's a sports geo. So they bring in an animator. He gets fired after a week. Bam Bam faxes Jose Leon. You should have put Hammer. No, he's a sports geo. Next guy comes in. He gets fired. So finally, Jose comes to me and I goes, I'm going to test you for a week. Anyway, I fell in love with animator. Bam Bam realizes the mistake he made. So, of course, he begs to come back, and Jose says, I want him. Because there was no contract at the time, Jose Ariel with such power says, I don't care. I'm having 2 animators. So for 3 months in Cancun in 1990, Bam Bam and I were animator. And man, we ripped that place up. So I learned so much from him, and we played off each other well. And you remember that job, that role, you had carte blanche to mess with 700 people in a funny way, of course. So yeah, that was the switch to animator and animation, if you will.
Wow. You and Bam Bam for 3 months in the same village.
Ridiculous.
It must have been amazing.
You can't do all those passages and entrances to the restaurant and go over, but we put one together. Everybody says they invented something in Club Med, right? So we would go to the Cancun airport, and of course it was a Wild West then. So we would go all the way back into the luggage area. They all knew immigration, knew the traffic, they didn't care back then. So Bam Bam and I dress up like 2 nerds. We go where the luggage is. We grab our fake luggage, or we actually brought it in. We arrive, we go on the bus with all the gems, full nerds, and we start talking like nerds. acting like nerds, starting to fight like nerds. And these people are looking at us and they're, oh, this is not happening. And Bam Bam would like crawl up onto the luggage thing in the bus and sneak up behind me, look down at me and drop things. I mean, it was nuts. We got to the village, we're lined up. I want a room 305, please. I mean, we were crazy. And GMs were at the reception. Well, there was no reception, sorry. At the arrival place going, I don't want a room with one of these guys. I don't want to be near one of these two guys. And then as the information meeting was happening that night, you know, how we did that with 500 people all getting their first day information, you know, we would walk into the information meeting with a towel on and a shampoo all over us and stuff like this. So, and then we got introduced as the two animators. So, oh man, we had the time of our life.
I could imagine. I could only imagine. 1990. Wow. Okay. Then you proceed to Martinique. Okay. Animator. And then I see a season in Playa, you become chief of animation, correct?
Yeah. And, you know, for anybody who might be listening to us that went through this, and you know how many did, Greg, it was the way we learned under pressure or, you know, survival of the fittest and whatnot. I got sent to Martinique by Jose because it's time you learn how to be a chief of service. And so you got to learn French. So you go into Martinique, you get to learn French. I'm like, oh boy, you know, the stress is on, but you do it. So I remember getting off the bus, Chief of Village, Bernard Giampolo, waiting for me at the bottom of the bus. You're a hammer? Yeah. You're the animator? Yeah. You speak French? Yeah. And I remember that night, you know, on the microphone, bonsoir tout le monde, la piste de dance is open. And all, you know, all the French Parisians looking at me, just wanting to kill me. But you learn and you get through it. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's like bodybuilding life. You push yourself, you grow muscles and you get stronger.
Okay. So as chief of animation back then in the early 90s, was that the route to chief of village, or was it chief of sport, chief of village? Or were you not thinking about that at that point? You were only concentrating on the job.
Great question, because it's actually a challenge that still exists today through the years. It's one of the few departments in the village that doesn't have a clear development path. Because, you know, the technicians were technicians. Many of them became an RDS, but it wasn't natural in their profile, as you know. The choreographers had all that show strength, but their focus was so much on the stage, they always had trouble having a larger scope. And then you had the animator. Some of them were so nuts, there was no way they were going to manage somebody. But yeah, I think at the time that was the path, or the chief of sports, as you remember, would move laterally. So I started Club Med at 29. So by the time I hit Cancun, I was probably 31, acting like a kid, but with a few smarts of a 31-year-old. So yeah, that became the path. And I kind of got identified and they said, you got to learn some French. And I, you know, chief of villages, there's nothing like it. And people told me, and I told others after, you'll never spend a time of your life like this, which is still true to this day. But preference maybe for the experience, boy, those chief of animation, or as we say today, responsive events, what a position. I mean, you're creating, you're making a new show. Again, carte blanche on the stage, events outside. And, you know, you're almost managing the whole village because every GO and sometimes G has to perform in one way or the other, and you're holding the reins. Man, I love that position.
And I assume you liked Playa. Are you like everyone else? Did you love Playa because of the, you know, its situation? It's a small village, yet it was so concentrated. You know, you couldn't move around, so all the GMs and GOs were together.
Man, you must hear that so often. I mean, today I get asked the question in today's portfolio, which is awesome. And you know, we have luxurious brand with the exclusive collection. And I mean, we've got such a high level of comfort today, but still that spirit, still that conviviality with relationships with the GOs and Gs and GMs. But at the time when so many more were open, the easiest village to create those relationships were Playa. So as I said earlier, already ambience and relationship building, which was such a force and a love by all of us, as you know, that was probably the easiest village that ever existed in Club Med to do it. And there was so, as you know, so the location, the country, Mexico, the GEs and GOs from Mexico, the clientele, by far the favorite place I ever worked in.
I think everyone misses Playa a lot, you know, because it comes up a lot. Your name and Playa come up a lot on this podcast. All right. So I see for some reason, okay, you go to Phuket and do you become a coordinator of sports and animation? Did you have two jobs? And if so, why did you do that to yourself?
Yeah, great. Like that. You're right. Pain and pleasure. So you remember, and it's very similar today. I mean, you get to a certain degree. Today we call them key talent. Back away with the pot GOs or pot Gs. And in our time, there was not really an identification or management identification program. It was kind of They watched you, they observed you, you proved yourself. And behind the scenes, they were all working on your future. It was very secretive. And then you just got announced. But so many of us, and you've talked to many others, there was a certain ambition, not born out of selfishness usually, but born out of, I want to do more. I want to manage more. I can be such a good GO. Why can't I lead GOs? And that was my way. And then I would run into an entertainment manager or a responsive animation. I'm like, man, they can't manage their way out of a wet paper bag. Why aren't I doing that? So I almost did it by default. And then after a while, you're like, well, now I'm looking at the sports managers. And I guess it's that healthy ego too. I'm like, well, I come from sports. I can manage sports better than these guys. So at that time, someone told me, oh, you should do both. And I went, what? I said, yeah, there's a coordinator loisir position. So I started to ask around, how do I do that? And again, unbeknownst to us, chiefs of villages are looking at you and they kind of never told you what they thought of you in the day. They just kind of challenge you. But yeah, that came my way. And they just said, hey, for the next season in Phuket, you're going to be, if you make the stage, because you remember at the time, you weren't appointed chief of sports. You had to go to a sports stage in France with about 16 to 20 guys and beat them. It was not a development step. It was a selective process. Might have been one of the most stressful 7 days of my life. So you're against these, these monsters and Olympic skiers and long-term clubmen and speaking 6 languages. And you got to beat all these guys as the minority North American to become chief of sports. So, and you try to act cool at the same time. So you want to beat their butt, but you can't show it. Once you pass that, then I became sports and entertainment.
So where was your stage for chief of sports, if you don't mind me asking?
Pompadour, France.
Okay, Pompadour. Now, did you find, like me, when I did my stage in Opio, the hardest part about the stage was sitting in a classroom for 7 or 8 hours?
Man, and still today, huh?
Wasn't that the hardest? I mean, it was.
Well, I'm in the learning development department now, and you put people in a room, you've got to use, different techniques. And there are many training techniques like that, but you got to keep them moving, stand them up, change position. Get to, like you say, chief of sports or chief of village level. Oh my God. So yeah, we everyone fell asleep. As you remember, nodding off in that classroom. And then when we went outside and it was like letting the bulls run,
That's right. Now I see after Phuket, you go to one of my favorite places in the world. So I hope we can talk about Lindeman Island for a moment here. Which year were you in Lindeman as sports and animation? Do you remember? Was it still early 90s?
I have heard you love that place.
Yes.
Too. What an experience. And, I loved it for 2 reasons, because it was Australia, which is almost enough. Well, a bunch of reasons. It was already Australia, so that's incredible. But at the time, and I'm sure you had mucho as well, we were about 25% Japanese guests. And, a lot of GOs, especially the PR, of course. And that exposure and immersion into that world of Asia, I love that. And I used to always ask to work a lot in Asia. People say, oh, you didn't do much in Europe, you didn't do much in South America. And I said, well, because I always asked for Asia. So Lindeman was, the coordinator loisir, in charge of both for Philippe Calvet. Oh man,
which year are we talking, Hammer?
Oh boy, it's got to be 95.
Okay, 95. Okay, so it's only like 3 years after the opening, I guess, of that village, right? It opened in 92.
Yes, it was still, such a discovery net, and people hadn't heard much about it. And you got there, and every day was this new experience, and Australia was new, and the clientele was new. Yeah, what a place. So,
were you amazed by the GMs that didn't care if it was raining, only if the bar was open? Like they weren't fazed by. Was it eye-opening for you?
It was eye-opening to see a real demonstration of a strength of a chief of village. I always say I had so many mentors, but Philippe Calvet and Kevin Batt, helped mold me so much. But the 15, 20 French would come every week, and you're in Australia with really? Australian and Japanese guests. And of course, the French would come in, and to somebody from France, Club Med is French. To someone from Japan, Club Med is Japanese. To someone from America, Club Med is American. So he would face them down. And, that was qu'est-ce qui se passe? And you got to speak something in French. And you go, no, I don't. And he would just maintain the standards, English and Japanese in this village. And he would never say one word of French on the stage, because it would be like, well, we don't say one word of Chinese in Paris because 3 Chinese are there. So why would I go the other way? He was so fair in his management, but there was almost that self-satisfaction, because, the Parisians would always put pressure on you from entitlement, because over the years, that's how we tried to win their satisfaction, give them what they want. So every once in a while, you'd run into some strong management and say, no, it's not going to change the results. It's not fair. I'm fair. So that was always a battle in Lindeman. But the funny thing there was the Aussies. And you remember that. I mean, so laid back, but so laid back, you'd come to work one morning and say, where's Hamlin? Where's Greg on the beach? Oh, no, they left yesterday. What do you mean they left? Well, they got in the boat and they left. They wanted to go have a beer and they quit. I mean, it was so casual, so backpacker.
Well, they had a term for it, right? NBO, next boat out, I think.
Exactly.
Did you partake in the emu stroganoff and sweet and sour crocodile on the menu? Like, did you have those things when you were there on the menu?
Everything. I mean,
Okay.
everything exotic. It was wild.
And did you like the golf course there? Because it's kind of a beautiful, like the 8 or 9 hole golf course on top of the island, right? I mean, did you golf?
World famous. Spent a lot of time up there, and you just reminded me of one that I wasn't there. I guess I got to tell it. I don't think he ever listens to this, but who knows? You remember the American chief of village, the all-time crazy Kent?
Oh, yes, I heard what he used to, I heard something what he used to do. If we're thinking of the same story, yes.
That was on that 8th hole.
You were there?
No,
okay.
But
no, okay.
Not long after, because Greg
Okay.
Snyder was involved because Paris called Greg Snyder to try to help fix the situation.
Okay.
So as you know, Kenton Smith's with VIPs. He tees off on the 8th green. He sky highs a ball that doesn't even go past the ladies' tee.
That's right.
He automatically takes off his pants and he walks over and gets his ball, comes back half naked and hits it again. I mean, the VIP and the woman is just like out of control. Complaint to Paris, this and that. Long story short, they fly Kenton Smith to Paris. They call up Greg Snyder. You got to fly in. You got to come and talk to this guy. He's American like you. What's going on? They get him in the office, and Philippe, I'll think of his last name in a minute, but who was the director of all the Chiefs Village at the time. Philippe says, did you talk to Greg? Yeah, but he won't listen to me. So he's like, Kenton, are you kidding me? I can't believe you have VPs. You take off your pants naked, you walk. He goes, Philippe, those are the rules. That was his explanation.
Yeah, that's right. He made his own rule up for that. Yeah, if you shank the drive or something. Yeah.
But Lindemann was great, and a very sad moment when. Oh, actually, another side note. That was the era when we got rid of the bar beads to try to move to bar tickets. You remember?
Yes.
And Lindemann Island had a swim up bar up on that second level.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. Yeah.
Had to deal with those GMs all day long. Can you tell us why you have paper tickets in a swim up bar? No, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Or when you get pushed in the pool, right? Suddenly your nice thick wad of tickets is just soaked to the core. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, when you did your stage chief of sport, and like you said, you don't really know if you're going to get a first season chief of sport. So did you do some networking? Did you contact a former chief that you worked for, or did they just assign you, like you didn't have to do any of that? They just assigned you, okay, Hammer, here's your first village's chief of sport. It's in Martinique with so-and-so.
As you know, there's probably 3 levels that I'm speaking purely performance and profile and perception of people. Probably it still exists today. There's 3 levels of your personal brand in Club Med, which I still try to teach to GOs, not Gs so much because GOs is because of the mobility. You open your doors through how well you perform with GMs. You open your doors by your language skills. You open your doors by the level of positive teammate you are. And chief of villages might have acted tough back then, and they still might, but they're always looking at that. What do they want? They want the best team, period. Why do they want the best team? To take care of the GMs. So in that day, we didn't know it. Now I do. I did as a chief of village, and I sermonize on it now. But the more you just took care of the GMs, all the chief of villages talk to each other about teammates. And if they have a full team and someone says, who should I take? Oh, no, you got to take Hammer. He's always talking to the GMs. And boom. So in that period, initially, she's myself, Jenner, and I speak of us 3 a lot because, we built kind of a cowboy team. And, when you become a sports manager, you bring in your old cowboys. You become a chief of village, you bring in your old cowboys. The Reds and the Boons and all these people that you hear about use my name. It's because they were so great that I always wanted them with me. They might have appreciated me, but not half as much as I appreciated them. So back that far, I didn't know, but people were always wanting and asking. I had one dude who wanted me for Playa Blanca, my second time, Manuel Fernandez de la Rosa. Wild chief of village on stage, great, massive accent, Spanish and French. He went to the Paris office and he says, I need Ameur with me. And they were, I need Ameur with me. I mean, there's no documentation. So they're looking for Amer. They're looking for some Moroccan or Tunisian guy to go work with him. And finally, an American chief of sports was in the Paris office, and he goes, no, I think he's talking about Hammer. It's a Canadian. Hammer, not Amur. Because with their accent, they didn't even, and they couldn't find me in the books because it doesn't show Hammer anymore. So, no, it really, Greg, was a case of all the chiefs of village fighting for people that they thought they could make a team of that would take care of their gyms. All
right. So first season chief of sport was Martinique, correct? Well, just Chief of Sports? Because I know you were doing sports and animation before in Lindemann, and then
Yes.
okay. So did you make any rookie mistakes? Did anything crazy happen, or was it just a fun, crazy Martinique normal season?
One popped into my mind now. I don't think I talked about you earlier, but I was in Martinique. I arrived from Lindemann late, which is a kiss of death in Club Med. So the manager, the chief of sports, arrives for my first time ever with all Europeans. I got 34 French, one Italian, and my girlfriend, who's American, Julie. So I arrive in this team late, and they just eat me up. Here's the friendly Canadian, and I'm coming out of 2 years in Asia, and in Asia, it's respectful, friendly management, soft management, if you will, which is caring management, which works well. But you get with these hard, tough, old style Club Med Europeans, and like I said, they ate me up. So it's about 2 weeks in, and we finish the sports awards. You remember the old big sports awards, the medals and everything. And they're on stage, they're playing with medals, they're disrespecting, in my opinion, a few GMs. So the curtains close, and we're waving to the GMs, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. Curtain closed, and I say, everybody stop, circle up, sports team meeting right now, which is not exactly my way. And in this circle, and this is 96, sorry. I turn around, I look at people, and I fire 2 people in that circle. Now, I've never done that before, and I certainly never did it after. And I certainly coach and teach against that today. Yet the next day, I got 30 Europeans coming in. Oh, Hammer, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were so good. Man, you're great. Because the intercultural differences were so strong in those days that the hard director management was the only thing you could get the respect from. So that poor step in management won me over the entire team. Crazy times, huh?
I'll say, but what a beautiful village though, Martinique though, right? I mean, I think it's one of the gems out there, and I've seen photos of the newly renovated one too. That is a pool now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like Playa, there was something almost spiritual about these places, and legendary. And of course, that place had the legendary party for the Americans for a long time. That was made in '69, and in '69 was basically Woodstock. So that's how Club Med got attached to that, sea, sun, sex thing. Wasn't even near always the case, but it just got attached to Martinique, and then the famous picnics and things like that were still meant to break down the stress back home, make everybody hang out, but they even get the enhanced reputation of craziness. But what a vibe, what an ambience in Martinique, for sure.
Well, you go from, I think, one crazy singles village to the next, because next I think you're in Turquoise with Kevin Bad as chief of village, and you're doing Turks and Caicos as chief of sports, right?
And exactly, and kind of to wrap up that GO and RDS career is, as you get, and that's devastating. I know a lot of people that dealt with this. I was in Martinique, been around for a while, maybe about 8 years, and you're starting to get people tell you to be chief of village.
Okay.
And finally, Julie it was Jose Aliel who went to Julie behind my back and said, "Hey, you need to be careful with this, because I'm telling you right now, your boyfriend's going to become a chief of village." And she didn't want to believe it, and it took her a while, and then she kind of almost accept the situation and realize that you got to be partners, like super strong partners, more than just a regular relationship. And Jose told her and taught her that. Says the day that happens, he's going to need you in so many ways. And they always say a man in a great position has a great woman, or vice versa behind it. It's so true in the club. I don't accomplish what I do without Julie always being by the side like that. So I'm in this mindset that I want to become a chief of village, and Julie knows it's likely to happen, and all this backing up and whatnot. So the gentleman at the time, Frankie Gagan, the who followed Philippe as the director of Chateau, she's in the village, and of course, like all, I go to say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about my future." And this is a 2-minute meeting. He goes, "Well, yeah, this, that, where you? Oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah, how old are you again?" I said, "I'm 35." He goes, "Oh, well, you're too old to be a chief of village, but you know what? You could work in the office one day." And of course, I keep my poker face and whatnot, but I am devastated, which happens to anybody who's gone that far and has that desire. So I play it cool. I do my job. And about 2 weeks later, as I did in the day then, I would go spell off water ski Joes as a chief of sports and drive for them. So go take the afternoon off. So I'm driving the ski boat. I got a GM behind me in Martinique, and I'm driving the ski boat. I'm about halfway through the run, and I just break down. I mean, tears are coming out like a baby. And I got to turn around and get back to the dock. I got about a minute to compose myself, but it all came out at that moment, because then and today, there's something so special about our crazy culture and becoming a chief of village that it's almost obsessive you put the destination too much in the journey for a while there. So listen, I accept it, whatever. And Philippe Calvé, he knows, he comes to me, he goes, look, don't stop, because we were ready to bail. He goes, never leave on this note, go do another season. I go, all right, which was a year at the time. He goes, he gives me the Chief Village list and he says, where do you want to go? I said, what? He goes, you tell me on this list where you want to go, and I'm going to make sure you get there. I mean, this stuff was unheard of, and it's all because of how well you can do with GMs. So I look at this and I go, oh, turquoise, love turquoise, my first official season. And this Chief of Village, Kevin Batt, I've heard about him. Can I go there? So again, I don't find out till about 5 years later when Kevin and I become best buddies. He calls up Kevin Batt and he offers us. And Kevin Batt goes, wait a second. You want me to take a 35-year-old chief of sports and his girlfriend, because, you know, we never like couples in those days, who just got told he'll never become a chief of village and is probably completely demotivated? And Philippe Calvé goes, yes. So, of course, Kevin Batt takes a risk with us, who he didn't like it. And, of course, I get there and the party starts and the two Canadian blood brothers get together. And next thing you know, he says, I'm going to host your wedding. And then we get married, Julie and I, and then we're going to buy a sports bar in Turquoise on Providenciales, change life. And Kevin says, don't do it. I got a feeling you're going to be a chief of village. And I said, no, I've been told. What are you talking about? And again, little did I know that through that time, Kevin had gone back to every single chief of village I ever worked with and told them to write a testimonial. And he sent this book to Paris from all the chiefs of village and himself to push for me. And you know how those stories go. Before you know it, I'm setting up a cocktail in Turquoise for all the gems. And instead of on the microphone, the chief of village after Kevin announcing all the gems, she turns around and goes, this cocktail isn't for all the gems. This is for our newest chief of village in Club Med, Hammer. Blah, blah, blah.
Wow. So he didn't give you any indication that this was coming. He was going to surprise you, right?
Worse for him, he didn't even know. He had to leave Turquoise after all that work and all that belief in me. He left without knowing and thinking maybe I wouldn't. So he moved on to his next village, all sad. And then it all happened, like 2 weeks after.
Oh, wow. But did he was there for your wedding, correct?
So middle of the 2 seasons in Turquoise, we say we're thinking about it. And he goes, well, no, you're not just thinking about it. You're doing it because, Kevin Batt, he's like, you're getting married here. I'm hosting your wedding. So that was pretty funny because like happened years ago, I go to Turquoise and I say, well, the only way I can get married here is if I bring my wedding party here. And my wedding party is Cheese, Jenner, Sparrow, and Bo. And he's like, well, who are these guys? I said, well, they're all ex-GOs one way or the other. And they're all my buddies from Vancouver. He goes, well, I can't have these people come in. And I said, you got to trust me. You want to have them work for you. So you want to bring them all in for a couple of months, short-term GO, to be in your wedding party? I go, yeah. So he gets convinced to fly these four. I mean, we had like 60 friends come in, plus all the GMs for the wedding. But here's my wedding party, all these ex-GOs. Well, by 3 days into it, of course, Kevin, he's got all the guys at the bar going, you know what? Forget Hammer. You guys are working for me from now on. So he kidnaps all of them. And for the rest of his career and my career when I became chief of village, those guys were coming to do short terms all the time. It was like a battle between me and Kevin. I said, no, Kevin, I got Sparrow coming in this week. No, I need Sparrow and Cheese. So again, why did we want Sparrow, Cheese, Jenner, Bo, Red, Boone? Because of their relationship with the GMs. They were unparalleled relationship builders with the GMs.
Let's explore this friendship with Kevin just for a minute, if we could, just apart subject to Club Med, because when I came up to you at Reds, I was fascinated because I heard you had done an Ironman, which is one of the hardest things anyone could ever do. And not only did you do a couple, you did them with Kevin Batt, correct?
Yeah, that's
so who convinced who? I mean, if you can talk about it, that would be great. But if you can't, that's understandable. But I'm wondering if there's any convincing going on, or you're both
yes, it's out of control. And very often with us, it's kind of a back and forth. Like we said before, in any business, I think, and in any situation, be it military, business, team, professional sports, at some time you have to be a leader, and sometimes you have to be a follower. And all the great ones were, all the great GOs were at a certain time. So we were in the office when we reopened Sandpiper in 2011 and we started hosting triathlons. And Kevin, as would be Kevin's way, says, well, there's no way we're hosting triathlons in that village without us being involved. So he's grabbing everybody and the CEO, Xavier, and away we go. We do this first triathlon, which we had to do a rally because we were all out of shape. One guy rode, one guy ran, one guy swam. So we do that in Sandpiper. And of course, our CEO, Xavier, goes, well, that was easy. He goes, we got to do our own. And we're like, oh, no, don't tell me. So, of course, a month later, we're doing a sprint triathlon. Again, long story short, Xavier, well, we got to move from sprint to Olympic. And I was not a swimmer. I look at out at the ocean, I see sinking. So anyway, we go on, we go to Olympics, and then Kevin and I get the bug. And by 2013, we did 11 triathlons in a year, only to find out about a year later from a couple of pros, they almost wrung our neck and says, listen, nobody does that. You're going to kill yourself. So we had to dial that back. And then, as anybody who's done this and is listening knows, then you want to challenge yourself with a 70.3, a half Ironman. Ironman don't call it a half, it's a 70.3. So do one, do another one in Miami. And at some point you're hooked and you got to be thinking the pinnacle. You got to be thinking Ironman. But we're not stupid. We knew the undertaking that was. So this went back, forth, until no names, but some older friends, not Vancouver gang, but Clubhead friends, some GMs, some pretty respected people started talking about, no, don't do it. And a couple of guys come to me and go, hey, Kevin, he's bigger than you, and you guys, don't let him do it. And you guys don't do this. And for me, that was it. I mean, that's automatic when I hear that. So I went to Kevin the next day in the office. I said, look, I don't know about you, but I've just wrote a letter to my wife, Julie, and I am not going to have anybody say that to us. I'm doing an Ironman. So of course he had to get on board. So either he'd push or I'd push. We sign up. We're supposed to train a year. We do about 6 months, which is insane. We do Mont Tremblant in Montreal, which has 2 passes over Mount Duplessis. Not named after Handel, but the same name. And so we do this monster Ironman and we make it. And, people are going crazy. And I get asked a lot about, how, why, this, what's the most important part. And whenever I talk to another person they know who's done an Ironman, they know what you're talking about. It's just not first the physical training. It's the mental will first. You got to see yourself cross that finish line about 1,000 times. And they would have had to cut our leg off to not complete that Ironman. So yeah, we did that, and we did a couple others after. It's just most people will say when you cross that finish line the first time under the 17 hours, they'll look at you and say, well, great job. Now that was either a bucket list or it's an addiction. And it's true. It's either one or the other.
Was there a point in your first one in 2015 in Mount Tremblant where you questioned your sanity? Like, was there a point like what was I thinking? Was it on the swim portion or like what? Or
you focus and you stay with them, but there's a moment. It's funny you asked that one because we tell that story at dinner parties and whatnot. You swim, you get out of the water, the adrenaline's going, you get on the bike, and if you're smart and you've treated the nutrition like a science, you're on your watch and you know exactly how many calories you got to have per hour. And, you've got everything, as I say, down to a science, which is seriously more important than the actual physical training. And then you get the run. And then as soon as you take your first step on the run, you go, oh my God, why did I do this? So the run was always the most painful for us. So Tremblant is 2 loops and of like whatever, 12.5 or 13.5 and 13.1. And so I don't see Kevin because Kevin swims so much better than me. There's always a distance between us. But on the second loop, and you're close to dying, but I see a silhouette because the lights weren't working. So it's a very dark run in Quebec because we've already gotten sundown by this time. As you can imagine, we're on about hour 14. And I see a silhouette coming. He doesn't recognize me. We're 3 feet from each other and he sees me. We stop and we look at each other. 3 seconds of silence. He goes, how you doing? I say, okay, how you doing? Okay. And then he looks at me, he goes, can you tie my shoe? And I look down, he can't even get down to tie his shoe because he's seized up. So yes. I shake my head. I go down on one knee. It takes me 3 seconds. I tie his shoe. I look up at him. I go, you got any ibuprofen left? He looks at me. He goes, no. I look down. I go, oh. And then we look at each other, start running the other way. See you later. And we just start running. I mean, you're in zombie land. But at that moment, here's this, 2 guys have been doing this for half a year. You see each other and you can't even communicate. You're just in survival mode. But you don't stop. And crossing that finish line and hearing that, forget his last name, but Mike, the legendary announcer, you are an Ironman. I mean, that's something.
God, you make me want to do one now. Okay. This is all I need to hear. Well, I'd like to. I don't know if my body would let me, but I'd love to.
Yes, everybody can. If the 2 old Canadians can do it, anybody can.
All right. You mentioned a lot of names, Hammer. Now, is there anyone, like, I don't want to leave anyone out, and, we can always preface this by saying, if I forgot, to mention anyone, but you've already mentioned a lot of names. Is there anyone else that you haven't mentioned that I haven't asked you? Like,
I was almost wish you wouldn't answer that question.
Okay. So I don't have to. Okay.
I could.
You have mentioned a lot. You have mentioned a lot. I know. Even your village list is 2 pages,
And but it's a little bit in eras, because today, we talk mostly about, the way back years and those relationships with those people that mentored us. I mean, nobody really talks about them today. Nobody knew them. I mean, that's how far back it was. And the managers and the Hansels and the Joses and the Kevins and the Philippe Calvets, those mentors in Club Med. I say now also, if it's done well, you have leaders and mentors that later on, the reason that you'll go work for them anytime, I mean, you'd stand in front of a truck for these people. And that's the way I try to teach people how to lead, not manage, lead in Club Med. Is you've got to take care of your people so the people take care of the guests. You got to take so good care of your people that they'll do anything for you in a positive way, not manipulation whatsoever. It's caring management. Well, it was tough love way back when, but it was caring management. And in those days, we would have done and still do. I mean, to each other. At my wedding, by the way, we were trying to be on a budget. And I'm like, well, I said, our wedding, we don't have a photographer. So someone gets hold of Hansel, who was the photographer in Columbus. Hansel, who never left the village. He's a hermit over in Columbus. He gets on a plane and he flies over to Turquoise to be our photographer. Stuff like that. I mean, the relationships, it transcends friendship, as you know. It's like, going to war with your colleagues. Nobody else understands what you're doing when you're a GO. Those early years, like I said, the people we learned from. But when I became a chief of village, that group of people became more of an emotional attachment now, because these were the people that impacted my success. So when you get into the Reds and the Boons and the Scotty D's, and I'll go on, and often I think of somebody like Jenny Lopez, J-Lo, who passed away. And these people, I mean, man, they change your life.
Yeah, indeed.
That's why we got to do another one someday, Greg, to get more names in.
That's right. Well, I would like to, like, if you'd be willing to come back, and then we focused on your Club Med career up until Chief of Sports. So if you had time later in the year to come back, we can cover Chief of Village to present day, if that's okay with you.
Love that idea. I got to tell you one story too.
Yes, please.
Sorry, you caught me, because Turquoise being the first season, which is why we do a podcast like this, and you do it again so well. But it was funny to go back with Kevin, because it was meant to be the last season. Didn't turn out that way, but there was this full circle mindset at the time. And when we got married there, we thought that was it. I know you and I chatted about different celebrities that sometimes you come across in Club Med, and that early part of my career as Joe and RDS, I had Johnny Holiday, dude, Fabio, the guy who used to be at Jean-Claude Van Damme, we played volleyball with, all these cool things. That Kane Hodder, who was the guy who played Jason in Friday the 13th. We used to do beer drinking contests together and stuff. But a funny one is, we were at our wedding, and we're getting married in Turquoise, and Kevin is just setting it all up. We said, you got to tell stories. That's how we learned things from Hansel and all the past, because to make us kiss, you had to not make a toast, but you had to tell a story. So we're at the wedding, I'm at the head table, and reception manager comes up and says, hey, there's somebody wants to come in. I said, come in tonight? We don't even have a price tonight. He goes, well, he says he knows you. He says he's a professional hockey player named Glenn Anderson. And I'm like, oh man. Because as you might have heard, Greg, they used to have all the hockey players back then. Even Gretzky would not visit the village, but they were all buying properties then because of the taxation and all the Canadian lawyers down there. So a ton of hockey players lived in Turquoise on Providenciales. Now, Glenn Anderson, we have this weird background, because a way, way long ago girlfriend in Vancouver of mine left Vancouver to go model in Toronto, and she meets Glenn Anderson, and they become boyfriend, girlfriend. So, of course, she's been telling stories of us to each other, back in those years. So I was always aware of Glenn Anderson, and I wore number 9 in all my sports, and he wears number 9 in all his sports. Well, all his sports, professional hockey player. And this is a 500 goal scorer, Stanley Cup champion. So Glenn Anderson. So I start walking towards the reception, and I see this, big hulking 6'2.5" dude sitting at the reception. I'm going, this is going to be uncomfortable. So I walk up to him, and he starts walking towards me. And he goes, he gets close, and he looks at me and goes, hey, 9. And I look at him and I go, hey, 9. And he says, can I come into your wedding? I say, come on in. So we became fast friends, and Sparrow, General, these guys, Kevin became fast friends with Glenn Anderson. And, it's just one of those stories I had to throw out there, because you do have the opportunity to meet people and befriend people that you never thought you would, from not only inside the club, but outside as well.
Yes, sir. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned the luxury range, like the exclusive collection. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I'm not sure I'm too familiar about it. Is that okay?
No, great question. And it's funny. And you were there, I think, when that, capsule incomparable, when we started to move upscale, which took a long time if you think about it, because our strength was and is sports, ambience, entertainment, food experience, the social atmosphere. I mean, you could say party if you go back further, but social atmosphere for sure. Then and today. But when we decided to go upscale, which was to survive because the clientele was changing and we were going to lose everybody who wanted a bit more comfort. You couldn't have anybody anymore with no locked doors and no air conditioning. It just wouldn't fly. It took the GOs a long time to understand that. But we were following market trends for the gyms or we were going to go under. So we started to move upscale, which you remember was tough. We'd have to do meetings with pictures of dress codes. And I'd go up to Big Red. I like your dress pants. I like your dress shoes, but you can't cut the sleeves off your dress shirt. It took so long for the GOs to kind of make that transition. We used to have to make photos for everybody. More comfort. We renovated the villages, but now we still got that ambience and that relationships with all the GMs, GOs, Gs, and we're going upscale, and it's working. Well, again, the world changes, and everybody knows the world today. If you take a helicopter view, and people like to be pampered, and they want a spa, and they want good material, and they want really good hygiene security for their kids. So we always said, how do we keep the conviviality and keep moving forward into that comfort, that luxury sector, which is what we had to do. And so now we've done it. We've got, upwards of 15% of our portfolio is what's called exclusive collection. It was originally called Five Trident, but you're talking about the exclusive collection in Albion, in Mauritius Islands. It is butler driven. There's suites there with butlers. Every GM in their suite gets a butler. Our exclusive collection site in Charlevoix, the new one in Quebec, I mean, you go up into the lounge area, jacuzzi on the balcony. So we've got these exclusive collection spaces. We're focusing on the mountain product, but not just French Alps. We're in China, we're in Japan, we're in Charlevoix, we're going to be in Utah in 2 years. So we're Club Med, we're still the ambience, but we're continue to keep moving forward in that real exclusive, we call it the exclusive collection, where you've really got a premium brand. So we're selling a premium brand that's international and fun. I know I sound like a salesman, but it's true.
Oh, no. I really wanted to know because you mentioned Five Trident. So I think when I left around 2005, I think that's where it was at. So I didn't know it had evolved so much.
We teach that to the first season GOs. We call it, the integration of the onboarding program. And we got photos and you see the hut villages, in Greece and Italy and whatnot, the old hut, literally a hut with no door.
Yeah.
Public bathrooms. I mean, people forget, and I wish it was like the old days. And you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And then the first building in Agadir, building a winter village, not to get the guests. We built the first winter village in Switzerland to have somewhere to put the GOs in the winter because we didn't want to lose the GOs anymore. The first winter village was designed to take the water ski GOs and make them ski GOs so that the next season they could be water ski GOs again. The mini club was made. Why? Because back in the day, all these people came single and they became couple and they had babies. Oh, we need some more for our babies. It's such a cool voyage. It wasn't just business driven, but when you get the last 15, 20 years and you see a GM still wants to water ski. They still want to watch people on stage. They might even want to get on stage. They still want to do a volleyball tournament at night, but they want to go home to some serious comfort. They want to open their fridge and they want to go in and have some real fine dining. And that's what we do.
Nice. Thank you. Well, Hammer, do you have time for just one more question about Club Med?
Yes, sir.
I would like to know, what are the 3 things you miss the most about working in the villages?
I do get that one. That's for sure. Well, I'll kind of answer it in 2 ways because there's even that feeling of missing something when you're in the villages. And when I started, remember, and you did the same thing, we were basically all switching every 6 months, which is unheard of when you think about it today, to keep consistency of service. And each time we changed, the thing that was, devastating is you're leaving these intense friendships after 6 months. And, in tears, as you remember, like the gems that would cry after a week. And it was so impressive how we leave a village in tears, probably get the quick break at home, usually, get into your next village, and 2 weeks later, you're back at it. You get all these new friends. And then it happens again 6 months later. So not missing, because of course I think we all keep up with each other pretty well. But yeah, I could say that through those years and all the years, it's not seen such intense friendships and relationships and even acquaintances enough. But that's when you can say thank God for social media and the ability to communicate today. So people, man, people. But today, when I left the villages, and I've had that question for these 14 years, I always answer it with Christmas. And they like, what? And you know this too. There's that feeling, especially when you were organizing. So especially from a chef de village perspective, when I looked at Christmas, New Year's, every chef de village looks at full village. I can increase my results. I want to get my GM satisfied. It's a 2-week period where I got to win. But I always believed, like always, you win through the team. So to do deco with the team, to do the geo program with the team, to not do it myself with the entertainment boss, but to get 8-9 people to talk music, to make the music program for New Year's and build it as a team. And especially to take that mini club manager and the entertainment and all those geos and build the mini club show. That December 25th, usually. Sometimes the 24th, I would take the risk and do the mini club, all those kids on stage, and watch every parent give a standing ovation. I mean, I was that intense. It's heartbreaking not to do that every Christmas. So for me, it's that Christmas 2 weeks is what I really miss.
And also, I guess you miss the freedom and probably the most important teammate of all, right?
Funny. I did talk to you about that one.
Okay.
Because again, you remember when I was saying about you could bring a group of people and, you get HR at the time, the HR business partner assigning people and who do you want on your team? They didn't even ask me who I wanted. They already knew who I wanted. I had the same gang, all the best of the best I always wanted. In my opinion, the best of the best. It's funny because, you talk of Club Med being a party. Julie and I were a couple in Playa Blanca, 1990. My second season, Julie and I were already a couple, married in 97. So of my 39 seasons, 38's with Julie. So there was the hammer, cheese, Jenner start. And then there was often, hammer and Julie. When I was a chief of village, I'd stay busy. I'd go say hi to everybody in the restaurant. I'd come down and sit at my table. Julie would make a table for me every day with 7 great guests. She'd form my table for me. So yeah, I used to joke about that and say, well, at least it was easy to not have to break up with my girlfriend or my wife because I just say she's on my team. So and right. So I don't have to miss her. So that was part of the reason we left the club is we were looking around. We had 2 kids. Left the village. 4.5, 2.5. And they were getting the best of the best in the club. I mean, to bring up kids in the club is awesome. And it was for no other reason except that there was almost not enough villages left for the right schooling to them with the language we wanted that we hadn't already done. We didn't have to leave. It wasn't with the wife saying we had to leave. It was not tired of chief of village. And there was some pressure for a promotion. So the idea of having, instead of impacting 200 GEs and 100 GOs and 700 GMs. Now I thought I could go into HR and impact 3,000 GOs and Gs. And so that's why I wanted to move into HR. And as you say, I got to take my best teammate with me, my wonderful wife.
Great answer. But I did lie. I think I have one last question for you if you have time. Do you have, because you've been so kind with your time, do you have any last words, something you'd like to say before we end?
Now you're in trouble that you finally picked the guy who likes to talk the most.
That's right.
No, listen, I go back to that question you asked about people. And if we both commit to each other to do something again, we'll be able to do more people. But man, the people, that's how I got into HR. And, Gilbert, I was told by the real chief of villages. And I said, didn't you do a chief of village stage? And they said, chief of village stage. There was no chief of village stage. The chief of village stage was 30 seconds. And I go, what was that? And all the guys back in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, they would go see Gilbert Trigano before they went to their village, of course. Because, this was like pedestal time. Chief of village on a major pedestal. They go to Gilbert Trigano's office, talk about the place they were going. And as they were walking out the door, he'd say, stop. They'd turn around like clockwork and he'd say, take care of your GOs and your GOs will take care of the GMs. And I heard that early in my career. And so not only was it true respect and I was not a dummy. I knew and made it a lifelong mission to try to improve my management and leadership. But out of that message that sincerely, if you took care of your people and you led by example and you did exactly what you were going to ask them to do, then why wouldn't they? So how could you not have a great season? And so, I never like when someone said, you did a great season. I said, come on. I know I might sound like a commercial, but I never did a great season. I just happened to impact Geos and G's enough that they did a great season. So again, big shout out to you, Greg, but all these people who do the podcast, and they do it because of that emotional attachment in the club, all those people that helped me get where I am today, and especially all those people that worked on my teams. And I don't say worked for me, I say worked with me.
Excellent. Could not have said that better myself, sir. Well, I do want to thank you again, Hammer, for taking the time to speak to me today. It's been it's a huge honor. Thank you very much.
Well, the honor's mine, my friend, and so let's do it again somehow.
I would love to. I will get in contact with you. I'll give you about a 6-month head start, and then you'll start hearing from me, if that's okay. I'm going to flood your inbox.
Thank you, my friend. Enjoyed it.
Well, everyone, that was the amazing, the one and only Hammer. And Hammer and I wish you a great week, and we'll see you all next time. Say bye, Hammer.
Ciao, everybody.